There's a saying from business guru Peter Drucker: culture eats strategy for breakfast. And in many ways, this is the lesson that we learn at the very beginning of Parshat Beshalach. I know that seems odd, but stick with me for this. The Torah starts by saying, "Vayhi Beshalach Paro ha'am, v'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz plishtim." When Pharaoh let the people go, he did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, though it was nearer. And God said, "The people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt." Now, let's just look at the map for a moment and understand the path of the Jewish people through the desert. So the path goes like this. It starts over here in the land of Goshen, and it's going to cross the Red Sea, and it's going to go all the way around about. Now, you should know there is a quicker way. We'll get to that a little bit later. Why did God not take them that quicker way? The answer seems to be that God was afraid of what they would meet along the way. The typical understanding of this is that the people were not yet ready to fight the war with the Philistines or whoever occupies that coastal plain. But there are some pieces of evidence. Rabbi Yoel ben Nun cites the Amarana letter of 1350 BC, which suggests that Egypt was actually trying to expand its reach along that coastal plain against the Phoenicians. And so if the Jews were to go by this way, the way of the Philistines, they would perhaps not be the Jewish people escaping from Egypt, but perhaps they would be a colonial force going out to be part of the Egyptian effort to subdue the Philistines along the coastal plain. And they would still be very much within the reach and the cultural orbit of Egypt. They would be right next to Egypt. They would be part of the Egyptian force. They would have the support of the Egyptian army. They would be very cultural vis-a-vis Egypt. And guess what? At this point, the real fear, the people may have a change of heart and return to Egypt, was very much a reality. Egypt's cultural force may be still exerting its influence on the Jewish people. And so God said, I'm not letting you go this way of the Philistines. We have to do something very different. And what is so interesting is that the Philistines occupied this part of Israel, where Tel Aviv is, the sort of coastal plain, this area that is now Tel Aviv, Rehovot, Haifa, Netanya, all of those places. But our forefathers and David and the historical Israel really lived in places like Jerusalem, Yehuda, Hebron, Kiryat Arba, Shechem, Shomron. These are the names of places that are found in the Bible. And all of those are up in the hill country, away from the coastal plain. It's a place which is much easier to fortify. It's a place that you can build with stone, because limestone is very plentiful, as opposed to what is essentially the major highway that is the coast. And one theory here is that the Jewish people needed to establish something different. They needed not to be corrupted by the hierarchies and the oppressive regimes of Egypt, by these ancient societies that believed in centralized power and didn't have this idea of democracy, of equality, of Am Mamlechet Kohanim, of a nation of priests. They had a hierarchy structure, and Israel had to exist culturally separate from Egypt. We learned last week that they had their own calendar because they had to get separate from Egypt. They had to make matzah because they couldn't eat the bread foods of Egypt. This is an exercise in trying to create a new and different people. And so they had to live in a different space. And therefore, they couldn't take the path of the Philistines. They couldn't take this direct route. They couldn't live on the coastal plain. They couldn't be subjected to the influences of all the peoples that God was trying to distinguish them from. And so perhaps that is why God took them the long way around, and they settle over here in Jerusalem and Hebron and Beit El and Beersheba, and not in the coastal areas of Gaza and Ashdod and what will become later Tel Aviv. And that's what it means or at least that's what I intended it to mean. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Hashem knew that there might be beautiful strategy in the mitzvot of the Torah. There might be tremendous wisdom. But if the Jews were not able to create their own independent culture, they were never going to succeed. And the truth of the matter is, in so many ways, that remains our struggle today. How to remain authentic and true to our culture, even though we live in almost every corner of the globe and we are involved in culture of so many ways. It is truly maybe our continuing struggle not to be sucked into some of the more corrupting elements of modern culture and try to live and establish our values and our identity by the culture that the Torah gives to us in its beautiful and clear directives.